Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started. I am Megan Kimatek with ACTE. I'm the Director of Leadership and Awards. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today for our webinar. I think it will be a great topic and discussion. So with that, I think we'll get started with a few items from ACT and then introducing our panel. So first of all, I'd like to mention our high quality CTE program of study framework. We'd like to remind everyone that ACT has developed an evidence-based study quality CTE program of study framework, which includes 12 elements designed to help CTE educators and administrators develop and improve the quality of their CTE program of study. Access and equity is one of the elements included. We believe all programs need to focus on this issue and all of the other elements in the framework in order to have a high quality program. We urge you to visit the web address listed on this page to learn more about the framework and tools the ACT has developed to support the CTE field. With that, I'd also like to mention our IAD activities right now. We have an IAD advisory group that members can join to advise on to provide recommendations, expertise, and outreach to support ACT's IAD initiatives, which we invite all of you to join and be a part of. And more information can be found on our website, which is listed below here. Additionally, ACT has developed a new IAD mentoring program, which will soon launch to provide mentors to ACT members interested in IAD leadership roles in ACT and advising existing leaders in ACT on IAD issues. ACT is working to increase its IAD programming at our events, as well as in other ways such as this webinar and other upcoming webinars. We also have 3 equity-focused pre-conference workshops and a long list of IAD-related sessions at our upcoming Virtual Vision event, which we encourage everyone to attend our Virtual Vision event. It will be obviously virtual for the first time, and I think we have an exciting program, so we hope you will join. One other quick programming note before I introduce our speakers. ACT is hosting another IAD webinar next week on demystifying causal impact research and understanding why it is important to CTE. We hope you will join us on Thursday, October 29th to learn more about the work of the CTE Research Network related to CTE causal impact studies. And with that, I think I will introduce our panel, which I am so grateful for all of their participation today. So first is Chaney Mosley, who will be our moderator today. Chaney is an assistant professor of agriculture education at Middle Tennessee State University. He has 20 years of experience in career and technical education, having served as a middle and high school agriculture teacher and a high school assistant principal and a CTE director. Chaney serves as the ACT Region 2 Vice President and is a member of the Tennessee Army National Guard. Our panelists are Kirk Mogg. Kirk is the co-leads the firm-wide agribusiness, food, beverage, and timber industry group at Stoll Rivers, Oregon's largest law firm. Kirk grew up working on his family's farm and feedlot in Eastern Oregon. His law practice involves advising clients in natural resource industries, including timber and forest products companies, agribusinesses, water suppliers, and manufacturers. Kirk graduated from Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Science with a degree in environmental economics, policy, and management. He earned his law degree at Georgetown Law in Washington, D.C. Kirk is president of the boards of directors for the Oregon FFA Foundation, which raises funds to support Oregon FFA and agricultural education in the state, and the Cultivating Change Foundation, a national nonprofit with a mission to value and elevate LGBTQ agriculturists. Mia Farrell, Dr. Mia Farrell, a native of Louisville, Kentucky, currently serves as the Assistant Dean and Director for Diversity at the University of Kentucky, College of Agriculture, Food, and Environment. She serves as a national MANRRS president, received the 2017 National Manners Advisor of the Year Award. She is in cohort 16 of the Food Systems Leadership Institute, a committee member for the UK Equality Feast, Big Brother, Big Sister board member, Kentucky Women in Agriculture board member, Next Door Grocery Store board member, served on the UK Women's Forum board for 2 years, graduate of the class of 2018 to 2019 Leadership Lexington, and a member of the UK College of Agriculture, Food and Environment Alumni Board, just to name a few of her leadership commitments. Lastly, we have Ellen Thompson. Ellen has served at the National Association of Agricultural Educators in various roles over the past 11 years, currently as project director. She travels throughout the United States, raising awareness of the need to recruit and retain quality and diverse agriculture teachers, encouraging others to consider a career teaching agriculture, celebrating the positive contributions that agriculture teachers make in our schools and communities, and ensuring that agriculture education is a welcoming and safe place where individuals are celebrated as their authentic selves. Prior to her position with the NAAE, Ellen taught high school agriculture for 8 years in Sauk Center, Minnesota. I welcome all of you, and I appreciate your participation today.
Thanks, Megan, for those great introductions. We'll go ahead and get started because we have less than an hour and we have a very important topic to consider. Hey, I wanted to welcome everyone to this webinar and say thank you for joining us for this important and critical conversation. I'm Chaney Mosley, as Megan said, and I'm an assistant professor of agricultural education at Middle Tennessee State University. I've been involved in numerous efforts related to inclusion, access, equity, and diversity. I served on the NAAE's Inclusion and Diversity Task Force. I worked on the Commission for Equity and Diversity at Virginia Tech when I was a student there. I engaged in some inclusion and diversity work in the military, and I've been involved with other organizations. These conversations happen all the time, right? Back in 2016, I was asked to be the theme editor for the Agriculture Education magazine. The theme was Global Workforce Development. Are your students ready? I'm sorry, that was the topic of an article. I apologize. The theme was Workforce Development and Credentialing Our Students. It was volume 89, it was issue 3. And as the theme editor, I was charged with finding people to write articles. Well, at the same time, I had been involved with conversations with NAAE and the Cultivating Change Foundation and MANRRS around these topics. And so when I was asking folks to author an article, I talked with Marcus Holland, who was representing Cultivating Change, and Ebony Weber with MANRRS, and asked them if they would write an article about workforce development from a diversity and inclusion perspective. The resulting article was titled Global Workforce Development, Are Your Students Ready? Yeah, a lot of the articles there address industry certifications, but because of this important conversation around diversity and inclusion, I knew that that was an issue that would relate to workforce development. The article provides practical examples and case studies and questions that are applicable to agriculture education classrooms, and you can find this on the NAAE's Agriculture Education magazine website by looking at the archived articles if you're interested. But that's sort of how this conversation came to be. And I was talking with Steve DeWitt and Megan from ACTE and thought this would be a prime opportunity to introduce this topic for a larger conversation across the country. So I'm really excited to have the guests who have joined us today. We'll start with some opening remarks from each of our guests, Mia, Ellen, and Kirk, and then we'll dig into some questions. I'm also going to watch the chat box. So if you have a question at some point for any of our panelists, please feel free to type it in the chat box and I'll try to bring that to the conversation as well. Ellen, I'm going to ask you if you'll start first just with some opening remarks from NAAE.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Mosley and everybody else who's joining today and ACTE for scheduling this. And obviously, as Dr. Mosley said, this is something that's really important to us at the National Association of Agricultural Educators. And I can speak a little bit on behalf of the National FFA organization as well. I've been working with them over the course of the last 3.5 to 4 years to develop what we're calling our Agricultural Education for All plan, which is really what our organizations are going to do to assure that we are welcoming and safe places for all individuals as their authentic selves. And so we're in the midst of doing that, and it's been something that's been very important to me for quite some time, and I'm delighted to be here, and hopefully some of the things that we've been able to learn and do over the course of the last 4 years will be useful to each of you in your own worlds, because this is a personal journey, and it's certainly something that I've been on, as well as our organizations, and look forward to sharing some of those thoughts with you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you for being here. Hey, Mia, will you give us some greetings and some information about MANRRS?
Absolutely. So good afternoon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And so it's an honor to be here today. And thank you all for having MANRRS as a part of this discussion. And so if you are not aware of MANRRS and who we are, I'll give you a short snapshot of that because we could be here all day. But we are an organization to train and increase diverse talent in the agriculture, natural resource, and related sciences space. We have 65 chapters in 38 institutions, and so they are represented at most of our land grant institutions, which is our predominantly white institutions, as well as our historically Black colleges and universities, but we are also at the tribal institutions as well as our Hispanic servant institutions. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and have been around for about 35 years. And so with that, we are pretty unique in that we have chapter membership for youth starting at grade 7 through 12, which is junior MANRRS. And then we also have collegiate students who are undergraduate and graduate students. And then we also have professional students in our organization and retirees. And so when you are talking about where members are on that membership continuum, we have membership from all aspects. And so the question was asked about kind of an overview of that summary of how our members are prepared for the global workforce development. And so I'll kind of give you a snapshot and then we'll get more into conversation later. But one of the things that we truly focus on is professional development. So with that, our students are networking as early as 7th grade, but they have the opportunity to go to both of our premier events, our regional cluster in the fall, which they're able to engage with employers, learn what employers are looking for as far as internships and full-time positions. And then we also have our national conference, which takes place in the spring, usually in April. We also have the opportunity for our members to study abroad. And so our students or our members can read the textbooks and look at the content and search the internet, but it is so much more impactful when they're able to study abroad. And so many of our members have that opportunity. And then they also have the opportunity to take part in civic engagement. And so what we have truly learned is that when they're able to engage in the community, they have a better sense of community. And so I'll stop there because I can get more into it when the questions are asked later. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mia. And Kirk, we'll come to you. We'd like to hear a little bit more about you and maybe your involvement with the Cultivating Change Foundation and what's going on there.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Thrilled to be here joining you from the West Coast today in beautiful Portland, Oregon. So let me start by saying I'm here wearing my my board hat as president of the Cultivating Change Foundation. The Cultivating Change Foundation was formed about 5 years ago. It's a national nonprofit with the mission to value and elevate LGBTQ agriculturists. So in contrast to MANRRS, we're a very fledgling organization. You know, we're 5 years into the work that we're doing, but I'm really passionate about the work that we're doing. And so let me back up and tell you a little bit about my why. You know, when we look at the Cultivating Change Foundation's mission to value and elevate LGBTQ agriculturists, I kind of unpack that and put it perhaps a bit more simply to say, I want every young person who is passionate about agriculture to know that there is a place for them there, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. I don't want students, and I know that part of the conversation today is about, are students ready for the global workforce? But I think there's also an important question, and one of the things that I'm passionate about is making sure that students from a middle school or high school age aren't opting out of careers because they think that there is not a place for them in those careers, because they have a perception that ag isn't welcoming to a member of the LGBTQ community or another underrepresented group. And so I'm really passionate about the work that we do, because I think it's important that we make sure that students know that there is a place for them in agriculture-related careers. I'm a product of ag education. I don't currently work in ag education. I'm a lawyer who represents ag and natural resource industry clients. So I'm on the industry business side of things, but remain very, very closely connected to ag education through my role as president of the Oregon FFA Foundation, and then through my work with the Cultivating Change Foundation. I'm going to share just a brief, very brief story about just an example. One of the things that drove home for me this idea that seeing people like us in careers that we aspire to is so important. So after the Oregon FFA State Convention a couple of years ago, I went to a friend's house, and his daughter had participated in the state convention. Before she went to the state FFA convention, she said she was going to be a veterinarian. That's what she'd been talking about for years. And she got home, and her father asked, what was your takeaway from the state FFA convention? And she said, I want to be a state secretary of agriculture. And the father was, scratching his head. He's like, I have no idea how she came up with that. And I said, that's because Alexis Taylor, director of Oregon Department of Agriculture, spoke at the state FFA convention. So this young woman in the audience saw this confident, articulate, professional woman who is, speaking to a group of thousands of students. And at that moment, that student thought, that could be me someday. And I want to make sure that all of our students from underrepresented groups have an opportunity to envision themselves and to aspire to the career that they want, and don't feel like doors are closed to them because of who they are or where they're from.
Thank you, Kurt. We appreciate that. And thank you to all of our panelists for being here. Again, if you heard something that triggered a thought in you, and you have a question, a burning question, please take it to the chat box. I'm looking, and I'll be bringing those questions up as they go. To start this conversation off, I would like to ask all of our panelists to respond to this first question, starting with Mia. Based on your observations and your experiences, are students who enter the workforce from agricultural education prepared to work alongside or be supervised by or supervise people who are part of a multicultural workforce? Mia?
Thank you. So I would say yes, and there is opportunity for growth. So being that I am a part of the MANRRS organization, that is truly the impetus behind our organization, is to prepare our members for the diverse workforce and to make sure that our talent is prepared. And so our students are being prepared at the local level to make sure that they are engaged in these conversations, as well as taking these conversations throughout their community. So I'll give an example. Here in Kentucky, this past summer, we had the opportunity to engage with 700 4-Hers through our teen conference. And so our MANRRS members had the opportunity to go through training, which MANRRS is housed under my office, the Office of Diversity. And so they went through a comprehensive training in order to then take that training to the 4-Hers. And so they were broken down into different modules, and were able to engage with these students and have these members really think beyond what their perspectives or backgrounds may be, but also to have fruitful conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so one of our goals within MANRRS is to prepare our members for the workforce and to make sure that we have those teachable moments. So what we tell them is when you're in internships, you really don't have the opportunity for error because your goal is to get an internship the next year or a full-time position. And so when they are with us, we treat our MANRRS organization like a job. And so, you know, whether it's being on time management, so on and so forth, we make sure that if they are not doing what they're supposed to do, we hold them very accountable. Then we have those teachable moments. And so I can say that we are preparing our students for the global workforce, and there's also opportunities for growth to continue to make sure that they are being trained and are prepared for the workforce.
Thank you, Mia. Ellen?
Sure, thanks. And obviously it's a loaded question, right? It's yes and no. It's and I almost wonder if we're asking potentially the wrong question, and maybe the question is, are our educators prepared to develop students who are able to work in a global workforce? And so, you know, I think it depends, right? That's a very political answer in this very political time. It depends on the teacher and the student's experiences and engagements with others and their training. It's really about, are we supporting and developing both students and educators in this process? And when we say supporting, we mean both developmentally through training and financially. Are they able to provide students with the experiences and the engagements that they need? And that doesn't mean that they need to take them on an international trip. It means, are they able to take them to visit a community in their community that is different than what they've experienced before? And so I think, yes, we certainly have the capacity to ensure that our students are, but are we fully there yet? Probably not. There's a long way to go. And again, it just sort of depends on the teacher and the district and the educator that's in front of those students. We know the educators are probably the biggest impact on their in-school experience anyway. So it depends, but hopefully we'll get into some of the ways that they can do better in this area through this conversation today.
Thanks, Ellen. And Kirk, what about you? From your perspective, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends is really the right answer, or said differently, the yes and no. You know, I very much agree with both of those answers, and it really is. I think we could come up with examples of local ag education programs who are doing phenomenal things in the areas of preparing students for global workforce readiness. You know, I can think of examples of an agriculture educator at a very, very rural Oregon high school who brought me in to come talk about the Cultivating Change Foundation and valuing and elevating LGBTQ agriculturists, something that would not have happened a decade ago, even 5 years ago. And I think it is groups like this one. They are the trade associations and leadership at both a local, state, and national level within ag education who are moving the needle on this front. And you know, we aren't there yet across the board, but fortunately we're at a place where we can point to examples of folks who are doing it right, and that can teach others how to improve their programs and better support our students.
Kirk, in your opening remarks, you mentioned that you're representing the workforce, not being directly involved in agriculture education, but sort of being, I guess, in the peripheral of that. So this next question I'm giving to you. Also, I noticed that I asked you, made you wait till last for the first two questions. I'm wondering, can you talk with us about the different kinds of diversity that students will encounter once they enter the world of work?
Yeah, so I think there are certain, you know, we've touched on some of the types of diversity today, but what I recognize in my interactions, I live in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon is a very, very progressive city. you know, tips very, very one way on the political spectrum. And so it's very easy for folks to get comfortable with kind of the groupthink and mindset that exists around them. But I also work with, you know, clients in rural communities, natural resource industries that have more conservative views. So I think one thing to think about is that there are facets to diversity that exist in the workforce that are different than just underrepresented groups. And it's necessary to be able to work with clients who may not share your views. And so preparing students to recognize that even if they move to a particular area that they think, you know, and take a job in an area that they think is going to be welcoming and inclusive, there's also the aspect of in the professional world, the folks that you have to interact with or have the opportunity to interact with as part of your day-to-day job. So I guess I think in the you know, in my experience, there are many, many more facets to diversity and being able to work with people, not only whose backgrounds are different, but whose worldviews and ideas are different, and be able to do that in a way that is respectful of everybody that's involved.
I appreciate that you touched on the diversity of thought that exists in the workplace, because there is so much more, as you said, to diversity than the traditional labels that we think about: gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religious perspectives, and things like that. Mia, you said that you work a lot with youth, I think going down to the 7th grade, and this was a question that was asked also about your work with 7th graders. How does MANRRS, how does your organization prepare students to think a bit more broadly about diversity and inclusion once they enter the workforce?
So one, we have to change our message, right? So from a person who identifies as being Black or African American, there are histories that come with agriculture, right? And so with that, we are able to truly show the careers and opportunities that are available within the ag space, but also being able to show those transferable skills that they have. And so one case is that about 2 years ago, we wanted to truly expose we have a all male school here in Kentucky called Carter G. Woodson or in Lexington. And what we wanted to do was to expose them to agriculture. And so we started a research program. And so with this research program, these young men would come during the day, 3 days a week to the University of Kentucky, and they had a faculty mentor. And so through that, they were in different departments throughout our college. And so they were able to learn about the different areas within ag and in areas they were interested in, but didn't even know that they existed in the agriculture space. And so we were able to do, you know, a program like that. And then because of the success, those males then came to UK. Actually, 3 of them are here now, but then they also started an agriculture program at the school because the interest had increased and the males were very interested. And so it's very important for you to really be able to show exactly what opportunities are there, because it's not one shoe fit all when we are, you know, spreading that message, and we have to understand what audiences we are talking to, because all audiences do not, you know, get motivated by the same message. And so we really change up our message and what we do and how we engage our youth to make sure that they understand that they have a place and space in this space, in the agriculture sector. And, you know, we use junior MANRRS as that recruitment piece, but MANRRS is used as that retention mechanism. And so it's important to know, yes, we can recruit, but you also have to talk about retention as well. And so it's very important to make sure that we have both and not one and. So that's pretty much what we do and how we focus on, you know, that pipeline to make sure that that talent is aware of, you know, what is out here.
Steve, I think that answers your question. Not only does their work with 7th graders have an impact on high school enrollment, but it sounds like it impacts post-secondary enrollment as well.
Absolutely.
Ellen, I know that you've been doing a lot of work with school-based agriculture education for a while now. I'm wondering if you can enlighten us on some of the ways that educators can provide more access and inclusion related to curriculum, classroom resources, classroom activities, as well as the classroom environment.
Sure, and I think probably I would guess that that's probably one of the key things that people want to take away from every time we have these conversations. Are like, yes, everybody's on board and they want to do something, but they're not always sure exactly what that is. And I think it's important to first note that everyone is on their own journey in this area. And by everyone, I mean the educator to every single student in that classroom, and their experiences are shaped by their family and what happens at home, what they're reading, what they're watching, what they're interacting with, their ride or die folks. And so it's important that we understand that everyone is going to be in different places. And so training is obviously one of the first things that educators can do. But certainly, as Antamia said, is to first make sure that representation matters. It absolutely matters. And so Kirk said it as well, like you have to showcase individuals. So when you're assigning assignments, who do you choose? Is it a broad spectrum of individuals, from gender to sexual orientation to race, ethnicity to background to religion? We even, when we're talking about our ag teachers and we're selecting individuals to represent, we're even thinking about individuals who may be single, married, with a partner, have kids. There's a whole spectrum of diversity, and I want to always make sure that we understand when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about all of that. And so for someone to be successful in this space, they first need to make sure that they define what diversity means for them. Because we have a lot of teachers who will say, well, I can't have diversity in my classroom because there are no students of color in my school. Well, again, sometimes it's just awareness, and they aren't quite ready, or they aren't on that, they're in a different place on that journey. So the first thing to do with those folks is, again, to educate them that diversity is a lot of things. So again, representation, like even thinking about, what are the names of the people in your scenarios? If you have a scenario like the farmer needs to maybe be an African-American female, and not a generally speaking, white male kind of name. And I'm just generalizing here. I'm just giving an example. I'm not trying to come off as like saying that that's how it always is. I'm just giving examples. It also makes sure that that we engage with new audiences. Who are you bringing in to speak to students? Like Kirk said, who are the individuals that are your guest speakers? Where are you going on field trips? Who are you hanging up pictures of in the classroom? Is it all of the predominantly groups that we think of as, I'm at a loss for my words, but anyway, there's a lot of things that you can do to create accessibility. And then accessibility for all abilities. Are you using a microphone in classrooms so that all students can hear you? Are your videos closed captioning? Are you making sure that when you do go to spaces that students that have access issues can access those places? Are there accessible bathrooms and doors and those kinds of things? So those are just a few of the examples to really just make sure that we're trying to include all. Welcoming and safe place for all individuals as their authentic selves. And that means if a student is in the process of gender identity, are you calling them by the pronouns that they prefer? Being accepting of someone doesn't just mean that you accept them as they are. You need to accept them as they want to be, not just what you think. And so having conversations with students. So that's enough from me for now, I'm sure.
I appreciate those examples, and I want to call attention to what Linda put in the chat box. She said, yeah, educate ourselves as educators and learn about others. It's really important. You triggered a thought. I was recently supervising a student teacher, and in agriculture, we all know that something that we teach about often is genotype and phenotype, especially when we're talking about livestock breeding and genetics. And the student teacher asked the question, where do our genes come from? And a student said, genes come from our parents. And I heard a student under his breath say, unless you're adopted. And I thought, wow, And so I shared that comment. I heard it because I was a silent observer. I talked with the student afterwards, and then I talked with the student teacher, and it was a great teachable moment. And she said, I wouldn't have thought about that. And neither would I. And I am the parent of an adopted child. And so I thought that was a really great learning opportunity for me. Thank you. Kirk, you shared an example earlier about a friend's daughter, and he couldn't figure out where this new idea about a possible career had come from. I'm going to parlay that into a conversation about how students might differ from teachers. What do you think about how student perceptions could differ from educator perceptions when talking or thinking about access and inclusion?
So I guess my initial reaction to that is students I'm 20 plus years out of high school. I still consider myself on the younger end, but I recognize that my student experience on a number of boards that I sit on, I'm somebody that they bring on, to change the age demographics on the boards. But I also recognize that my experience is so much different than students today. And so educators, even early career educators, may have a very different experience than the students in their classrooms. But it may also be that I think we also have to recognize that so much of a student's experience comes from their home and community. And so an educator who maybe is teaching in a different community than they grew up in may have a very different experience than the lived experience of the students in their classroom. So I think we just have to think about and understand the place that our students are coming from, and recognizing that our lived experience will often be very, very different than our students' experience, and we've got to find a way to learn about and to put ourselves in their shoes so that we can better relate to and bring them along as we're trying to educate them.
Thank you, Kurt. On that note, Heather Singmaster from Asia Society dropped a comment, and they have an online module that specifically talks about respecting diversity in the classrooms. That might be a great resource. I appreciate, Kirk, that you talked about lived experiences being different. Mia, earlier you spoke about your personal social identity and how sometimes when working with youth or talking with youth who share a similar social identity, that you have to unpack some historical aspects of our country in regard to agriculture and race specifically. I'm wondering if you can share with us how schools might address current issues such as race relations that are impacting the classroom environment.
Absolutely. So we now have to address the elephant in the room, right? With everything that is truly taking place in this country. And so, I do teach here at the University of Kentucky. And so I teach an introduction to agriculture class, which is freshmen. And so in this class, we truly have the opportunity it's a class that really gives students an opportunity to be their authentic self and really share their lived experiences. And so one of the things that I wanted to do this year was to be intentional, to have conversations around current events. And now I know you may say, well, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But what I do, I serve as a facilitator. I don't give my opinion. I don't give my thoughts on, how the students should think or what they should say. But what I do is I pose questions daily when we meet. And I create a safe space. And so in creating that safe space, I made sure before, classes began, we met, in a hybrid situation to where I was able to see them twice a week. And so I was able to build that relationship with them. And then it gave them the opportunity to start to break the ice. And so you have to break the ice because you don't know where students are coming from. You don't know their backgrounds. You don't know what those triggers may be. And so we truly sit down and I broke the ice. And, you just ask questions. What's your favorite color? What do you like to do outside of schoolwork? And just start to break the ice that way. And then as we got into the semester, we started to talk about Breonna Taylor case. We started to talk about Black Lives Matter. We started to talk about immigration. Even today, we talked about agritourism, and it was fruitful conversation. And so it's not always about race, gender, and ethnicity, although we have a long way to go. And you have to be able to bring different content to the conversation where each one of your students feel like, oh, this is a topic I know about. Oh, this is my lived experience. And this is what I can bring to the table. And so I have a pre-discussion where our students, I put them in groups. And so I was very intentional in putting them in groups. Before class, they're in groups and have to discuss the topic. They have to come to class and present that topic as a group. In class, we have to discuss whatever the topic is. And so they get in-class discussion points for that. And then after class, they have to post on the discussion board. Hi. And so in posting on the discussion board and even having that fruitful conversation in the classroom, it truly does move that needle and helps them to get through their journey. And again, we're at all different levels on our journey, but it really warms my heart when my students say, I knew nothing about this. And the question that I asked them at the end of each class is, what was your key takeaway? And so to hear what that key takeaway many times is, I learned ... And so you truly have to be able to break that ice, build that relationship with the students, know their backgrounds, also creating that safe space. And it's a non-judgmental zone, and using those moments as teachable moments that may be those ouch moments. And even before class, I have guidelines that we go by. And so really creating that space to make sure that it is a safe space where we can come together, learn together, and grow together.
The preparation. It's what you just said is you have prepared your students to have those conversations that they probably weren't prepared to have when they entered the classroom. And that's incredible. I do want to point out, Chris dropped a link to helpful tools, including Indigenous Native American resources. Chris, I appreciate that. Thank you, especially about in agriculture. We often talk about land in place, and so that will certainly be helpful. Ellen, here's a question for you. In my work with you, I feel like every time I engage with you, you're asking me to either articulate a goal or describe how I will know when personal goals I've met have been set. So the question I have for you is, what are some measurable goals around access and equity in the classroom that some of our educators joining us today or viewing later on that they might want to incorporate into their own classrooms or into their instruction?
So I think it depends. So I mean, obviously every educator needs to develop their own personal program plan for how they want to improve inclusion, diversity, equity, access. And I think it's really important that people understand that this is hard work. This is hard work both in time and in heart and in just mental capacity. It's strenuous in a lot of ways. And so it's important to note that as educators, you should do what you can where you are in a way that is safe for you, meaning don't try to take on too much because it can become very overwhelming. And so thinking about that, for us in our organization, what we're using as our benchmarks or our goal access or our goal achievements are, do the demographics of our organizations represent the community? Which means we need to collect a lot of data. We have some data on race and we have some data on gender. We're starting to collect some additional data, but it's going to take a lot of time. Teachers can do the same thing by accessing, I believe it's NCES data, where they can see what the demographics of their community are, and then they can look at their own program and determine, where that, again, it doesn't measure every demographic that we've talked about here today in terms of diversity, but that is certainly one. Perceptions surveys are also very helpful. We are implementing or going to begin implementing the Intercultural Development Inventory Assessment. We've done that with some of our leadership team, and we're looking at that for some of our teacher leaders, national officers, and that really does tell you where you're at on the cultural competency scale and where, in some ways that you can improve that. And so, those are just a couple of certainly the things that you can do. For us, it really comes down to numbers because we're national organizations. But as an individual school district, you can even talk about, how many students in your classroom are exploring different careers than they were before and that are maybe non-dominant identity kinds of pathways. So it's not easy, and it can be very overwhelming. So just take it, like an elephant, right? A little at a time.
Great suggestion. I typed the web link in for the NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, and a lot of good information there. Kirk, I'm coming to you next with a similar question. Ellen talked about goals and personalizing the goals, and the question I have for you is, do you have any I'm guessing in your line of work you have to do a lot of assessments. I'm wondering if you have any recommendations on how we as agricultural educators can assess the inclusion and access efforts or barriers or challenges that exist in our classrooms. So how can we take personal stock of that?
So I guess that's a topic that we're continuing to struggle with, or to work through even at the Cultivating Change Foundation, to figure out how we're measuring success and whether we're working toward our goals. And one of the things that we're doing over the next 2 weeks is having virtual listening sessions to hear from our stakeholders and to gather feedback on what it is our organization needs to best serve LGBTQ agriculturists, but also the ag industry in helping them accomplish their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. And I really view it as taking the Cultivating Change Foundation from Cultivating Change Foundation 1.0 to looking ahead to the next 5 years being Cultivating Change Foundation 2.0. But I think some of it is, and this is less about specific measurement, but I guess what I would throw out there is, as you look out across your classrooms, it may be difficult to see what sorts of diversity exists there. Certainly some types of diversity are much more evident. And I guess what I would encourage folks to do is think about ways in which the bulletin board in your classroom or the virtual bulletin board shares information about groups within agriculture who represent diverse communities. So regardless of whether you look out at your classroom and say, I've got a large group of students who would be interested in MANRRS, you still should be showing information about this incredible organization that's been doing 30 plus years of work at the intersection between agriculture and underrepresented groups. Regardless of whether there's an LGBTQ student in your classroom, having information about the Cultivating Change Foundation, because even if a student doesn't comment on it, perhaps it makes them more likely to be an ally or comfortable having a conversation down the road, or it reminds them that there is a place for them in the classroom, in the industry. And to a comment Mia made earlier, one of the assessment tools, and again, I'm coming at it from someone who works in law as opposed to academia, and we're not doing the type of data gathering that you all are doing in academia, but asking the question, what was your takeaway today, to see what the reaction of students to various ideas that they're experiencing what their reaction is so that you can gauge the efficacy of the material that you're sharing with your students.
That's helpful. Thank you, Kirk. I just want to call attention, Betty dropped a resource, an additional resource about opportunities for Native American people, advancing agricultural science opportunities for Native Americans. I apologize. Thanks, Betty, for that resource. This next question is for all three of our panelists in voluntary order. Here we go. So certainly in classrooms and in conversations, maybe in professional networking opportunities as well, we might interact with others who have an invalid or maybe incorrect idea or perception of something, or maybe someone makes a comment that they're unaware is potentially offensive or is not culturally sensitive to others. So the question that I'm wondering is, when we experience these things happening in our professional circles and in classrooms with our students, what are some approaches we can use to correct those actions or those comments or those misconceptions?
I don't mind.
So,
go ahead, Ellie.
Nope, go, Doctor.
Go ahead. Okay. So I would say the big question that I ask is 3 letters. Why? And I say, why do you think or say what you did? And I say that because a lot of times people get a lot of misinformation. And as I tell folks, we can Google things all day. We can read the textbook, which is great. But when we are able to surf or see beneath that iceberg of, having fruitful conversations with people one-on-one, then we start to be able to debunk a lot of those myths. And so as we ask the question of why, many times you start to see that person will start to digress. Or they will start to, share that, I don't know why I think that way. And then you start to understand, okay, well, let me share X, Y, and Z, or let me engage you with someone from that background to learn more. And so it's just really getting down to the why of why you think that way, and then really bringing forth that awareness. Because I can say about 95% of the time that I hear things that are not true, it's because of what folks have been taught from their backgrounds or experiences or what they have seen. And so it brings another level of bringing that awareness. And then if it happens multiple times, then that's another conversation for another day. But I think it's just a lack of awareness a lot of times on folks' part. And you have to call them in and not call them out. And so that's pretty much how what I would say about that.
And so the only thing that I will add to that is, there are two conversations, right? Like the one that you have with students and acquaintances, and then the ones that you have with your inner circle. If they're my inner circle, like my mom, who forever, for as long as I could remember, had always said, something about the peanut gallery. And so throughout my journey now, I've learned that is not an appropriate term. So I'm able to tell my mom, like, hey, I just learned and here's why. And of course, then she's mortified. But again, it's about education and just sharing. With students, it's a little bit different. We should always come at it, and really anyone, right? Anyone, come at them with a sense of grace. This immediate cancel culture, not helpful. Because everybody is in a different place. Not everybody knows what you know. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. But how you interact with them is going to determine the way that they continue on their journey. If you come at it from a very elitist kind of, I know everything point of view, and you're just calling them out, as Dr. Farrell said, then that's probably not going to go well. If you come at it from a place of education, awareness, grace, kindness, that will generally take you a lot further. And it's a very touchy situation. When I was teaching, my students learned very quickly that the R word was just one of those words that was not acceptable, and why. And I think setting that tone and what you allow says more about and models more for students and your friends and your people than just telling. So what do you allow? But it is hard. It's very hard to have those conversations. But I think that's the difference between an ally and an accomplice. An ally supports those messages, and Mia's version is better, like bring them along, ask them questions, but really making sure that you help educate them along the way and give them resources to look into it further, so that it's not just like, just take my word for it, and have them places they can go.
And Kirk, before you respond, I'm going to give you an additional challenge, because I want a legal perspective on there. As you talk about this, maybe add on to this workforce bit, because something that I've heard others say before, and I believe Ebony Marcus wrote about this, is that there are federal laws that prevent people from saying certain things in the workforce that while a student may be able to get a job, part of inclusion, access, equity, and diversity is keeping the job by knowing what's appropriate and what's not. So maybe if you could like tap onto that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so let me address that very briefly. My area of law deals with, trees and water and dirt, and so I do not claim to be a legal expert on issues relating to workplace discrimination. But as time goes on, it is illegal for employers to discriminate against employees based on certain protected classes, and if an employer allows certain employees to engage in that, I mean, an employer is not going to normally get in trouble because of a one-off issue from an individual employee that does something discriminatory. I mean, that won't necessarily be attributed back to the employer unless there's a pattern of it, or the employer has not done things to correct and appropriately train employees. So I think, Cheney, to your point, an employer is not going to be able to, in the modern world, be able to tolerate an employee who engages in discriminatory actions, because ultimately, if that becomes a pattern, the employer will be held accountable, and the employer is not going to be, I would think most employers aren't going to be okay with that. Back to the two other points about what do you do when something comes up? And I guess the only two things that I will add to that portion of the conversation, one, part of it's about having the conversation with the student or coworker who made the inappropriate or uneducated comment. But then part of it, especially in the classroom, it's making sure that we are also having a conversation with the rest of the class to make sure that we address the impact that might have had on others. So it's not just correcting the behavior, but it's making sure that the students who might have experienced that also feel that they're safe and that they're respected. So I think it's appropriate to follow up in that respect too. And I guess the other piece that I'll say to this conversation is about, sometimes the comments won't be as overt, and it's easier to let them slide. But I think often, regardless of whether it's an overt or less overt statement, too often we expect the person from the underrepresented group to always be the one that corrects the behavior. And what's most impactful often is when an ally comes in and says, this is inappropriate because, or let's have a conversation about that. We should not always expect the people of color, the LGBT student, to be the one that corrects the offending behavior. We need to empower allies to correct the behavior of others around them. So it's not just, so that we're supporting those around us who may have been adversely impacted by those statements.
Excellent perspectives from all three of you. Thank you so much. We are coming to the end of our hour, and we have some closing remarks from ACTE, but before I wrap up, I do want to say thank you so much to Mia and Ellen and Kirk, three unique perspectives, but all three very important perspectives that I think are helping contribute to and certainly advance the conversation about inclusion, access, equity, and diversity in agriculture, as well as career and technical education in general. Megan?
Thanks so much, Cheney, and thank you to all of our panelists. I'll mimic what Steve was saying in the chat box, but this has just been enlightening to everyone, and we appreciate everyone's time and participation here. I know we're all so busy right now. I just wanted to mention that we also have an IAD column that launched in our Techniques magazine, which goes out to all of our members. And also that we have IAD Zoom backgrounds or other platforms for folks to raise awareness on this topic as well, which are located on our website too. Other than that, we thank everyone for their time and participation here today. And this will be recorded and posted in the next 24 hours or so. If anybody wants to access it, it will be on our website. Thanks again, and that's really all I had, unless you had something to add, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.